Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody's doing well this afternoon. This is right at the point where, as your lunches start to settle in, you start thinking, thank you very much. But I'm very pleased to be here today to have the opportunity to talk about our PCM journey and sort of the level set. We are very early in our journey. I first had opportunity to sit down with the folks at SBS about 4 or 5 months ago, and just sort of paint the picture of how I ended up here. When I was a kid, one of the things I was really excited about was science fiction. And the thing about science fiction that I really appreciated was this whole notion of time travel and being able to make decisions or understand what was going to happen before it was going to happen. And ironically, now as we look at our projects and delivery, the one thing that we never really had control over is time. And one of my favorite concepts or characters as I did study that science fiction was Slaughterhouse-Five, where the lead character, Billy Pilgrim, was in a situation where he lived his life over and over again, and he was in the middle of a situation he had to figure out. And for anybody that's been in a program for project management space, it always seems like, hey, I've been walking this project, the same challenges and things that haven't been anticipated. And this is why it's more about control than it is schedule. So, a little history of our company. We have been around for roughly 13 years. We were founded, our two founders basically had been with a couple of companies previously. This is circa 2011 to 2012, right when the space where a lot of the cable companies were looking at on-demand programming, and it was all about having technical implications at the edge and providing that bandwidth for on-demand watching TVs. Whatever the content that people wanted to watch. So we started off working with key partners such as Sprint, Time Warner, and just building those out at the edge. And over time, we migrated from that business specifically to just concept of digital infrastructure into larger builds. We have roughly 60 plus data centers across the world. And our initial bill is 1 or 2 megawatts, upwards now of 100, 200, 300 megawatt campuses. And as we look at our challenge, the one thing that's made us very successful is always raising our hands and yes, we can do what you do for the customer. And that is why we got into this. So one of the key things as we look at some of the challenges that Alex just sort of spoke on, there's the high demand of growth in our industry and sort of popped up all around. There's extreme demand for resource in terms of how many generators you're getting out there. What's the space? What's the land? As all the key points have delivered. And as we go through this, the challenges that we faced with our teams of building smaller sites around the world and much smaller environments and much smaller sizes has become extremely complicated in terms of what we're doing right now. And the other thing is we look at our global footprint, the challenges that we see in, let's say, for example, a build out in Chile in terms of dealing with permitting might be slightly different than what we see in what we had in the site we roll out in Jakarta. But fundamentally, as we go through the process, how are we capturing what we're doing? And I remember sitting in one of our first sessions, and I'm relatively doing this role. It's like, well, how do we do work? My head of engineering said, well, we know how to do this. We already have this process. So as we started diving into it, a lot of different people said exactly the exactly opposite and how we actually do work. Actually, we send this permit packaging out of this point, and it takes 4 days. The same person that was the other side of that process says, well, no, it actually takes 3 weeks, and I'm waiting on input for you. So I think one of the key things as we talk about the fact discovery is having decisions, information in a very clean way, so it's not about emotion. Right, sorry. So our key opportunity here to be successful, as we're looking at our global demand in this space, I was talking to somebody at lunch where we were just talking about the growth of ChatGPT as a platform driving demand in this space, where you go from 0 users to 16 million users overnight, and that's driving a lot of demand. So in the last 6 months, we're moving from a space where our growth of our pipeline and demand is 7x or sevenfold. And currently, right now, we have 6 to 7 very large projects that we're building in various sizes. We look at the pipeline, we've got roughly 50 that we'll be building at the same time over the next 6 to 8 months, whether all across a lot of different jurisdictions. And the real question is how, it's a happy problem, how the world do you get this done? So one of the, and like I said, very early into this journey, and the only variability that I'm sort of controlling right now is how often I get yelled at by my customers for not delivering on time or doing things. Kind of like when I was a kid, something like that. But anyways, strategic purpose that we're trying to get out of our employment, and as you guys are thinking about how you move forward for PPM, for if you're deciding whether or not you're going to move forward, or for folks that fit around in this space a long time, we love the input. But our purpose here is to identify and exploit hidden opportunities to increase our development yield. And what really brought us into this conversation, I think somebody was mentioned previously about the pressure for guaranteed investment returns, i.e. our private equity investors and owners. And with the cost of capital growing dramatically, and scraping pipelines or extended pipelines and doubling over, going from a 50-week period or 48-week period to 80 weeks for key components of the build, and time and understanding that, and then also incorporating the fact that labor is going up in this space and everybody's fighting for the same resource, and then tying back what we said in our very first, what Gary talked about at the very beginning, about less than 20% of all the work showing up on time. If you're not thinking about this in a guaranteed manufacturing style way, then we're failing our customers we're failing our customers, which we need to earn the right every day for business, but we're not supporting what we're trying to do in the industry. And our key objective out of this is really trying to learn and maximize our opportunities as they present themselves. Fundamentally, as PPM, it raises up awareness to things that you hadn't seen before or understand about your business, whether it's where your work is sitting from a time perspective and where you want to allocate resources. And our key focus in this has been really looking at 2 key areas. One, as we look at the front end of our process, i.e. the demand signaling as we develop and build sites. And 2, the back end. And one of the things that we noticed, or I noticed coming into this role, was it always seemed like we were 3 to 4 months behind on projects. And going back to the time control, i.e. if you knew that was going to happen, your customer wants to know that from a systemic point of view, or overall system point of view, because they have plans, they've got commitments to their customers. And we also need to understand that from where it happened. So our 2 areas are looking at the demand signaling coming from sales, our customers where they want to be in the world, as well as the back end, because as you look at the entire system, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier, about there's a whole system of work that happens from commissioning. Well, there's the planning, procurement, engineering, design. You have the actual construction, but once you actually hit the end of construction, hit the commissioning phase, that's particularly critical, because one of the interesting things about this space is that we own and operate and we deliver, and it's life safety, it's fully living and breathing the entire time. And one of the challenges that we face as we go through this process is that the same engineers that we're looking at building out, they're doing the design, are also the ones you're pulling into the commissioning, and then also with the program management organization heading off to operations. So that's why we're taking this focus. And the other key challenge that we have as we're going through this is that there's all kinds of work churning through the system as we have this. So as we configure this, so our approach has been how we produce across the project lifecycle and investing in talent development. So as we look at our production system model, our objectives, work process, WIP, and capacity utilization, it's who are the resources that are actually doing the work and understanding where it's stopping. And then also with regards to the status of process of how it's flowing through to the production control system. This is the most difficult challenge that we have right now from a cultural implementation, because going back to what we were talking earlier about the difference between schedule management and control. Control means that you only do work as it's required, and you're planning as you're pushing the work through, as opposed to, hey, here's a schedule, I'm mandated to it, I should be doing this. And I want to say that again, because that's the most important thing that you think about production control, in the sense that the decisions that you make drive your variability, and you have extreme power on that to affect that variability. An example that Gary used this morning about choosing the time when you leave to go or execute the work that you have to be somewhere is particularly critical. And to the extent that you understand that that flows through the systems, the sub-processes, and how everything's interlinked is very critical. And that's some of the challenges that we're sort of going through right now, where the talent development comes in. And it's all about leadership. It's all about what Sarah talked earlier about pulling people in and having them understand and changing mindsets. That people have done this for years. But if we're going to be successful, this is where the industry has to go, and this is why we're doing it, because otherwise we're not going to be able to survive. So how do you make work faster through the production system? And I talked earlier about the front end, the due diligence, engineering, permitting, the sales signals I get from our sales team, as well as to the back end. And this looks relatively simple, high level as you glance at this. And one of the things I always love about the presentation, we go through, it's kind of small and you have to pull out the magnifying glass to look at what that actually is. But it's a great depiction, high level depiction of how the work is actually happening. What this is forcing us to do as we go through this process is really have hard conversations around what's really happening in each of these boxes and point out the accountability. It's also a communication tool, fact-based, not emotional-based, to talk to our leadership, our partners about where we actually stand. And as we go through this process, well, like I said, we're still going through the initial configuration of the front and the back end of the software. There's a lot of key insights that we're getting out of the process, and we're asking the questions we never would have asked. So how we engineer going through the process, the typical, P6 or waterfall scheduling of what going through, and I'll take a step of the due diligence process. And the due diligence process we talk through right now, there's two conversations between our market development teams, our engineering teams, and there's an output to it. But ultimately, we said 2 weeks or how many days or how many days you go through it. There's actually 40 to 50 conversations or handoffs that are happening into it. And if you look at your overall capacity, this is just one project as you go through. If you look at your whole fleet of projects or development, going back to what I talked about from 7 to 50, and you understand who the key people are doing that work, you can allocate and have a more effective utilization of the work as it actually flows through. And this, like I said, this is one of our disciplines in engineering, but it's a entire ecosystem. And where we're trying to take this is, as it would cross the system, it's all about information sharing across the system. Who participates in our whole delivery cycle? And it's the manufacturers, it's the commissioning agents, it's the general construction, it's our customers, as we share information. And as we build out, that information helps us collectively as a system work better together. As we look at how much we're totally buying, when we need these resources. This work is not going to happen, and I can't do this job for you. Here's why. If you give me 6 months, I can take it on because of where I am in the cycle. That's a much more powerful conversation because we would much rather know, going back to predictability and variability, that you were going to be late on a project. I hate talking about being late, the old sailor in me, but you would rather know that 6 months in advance you were the jackpot as opposed to a month before you're able to talk to your customer. Because that can be adjusted and that eliminates variability on their part. I'll use a permitting example. We had and as sort of getting into this, we had a permitting challenge at one of our sites. We were building for our customers in Chile, and I was new, sort of talking to my team, and I asked, "Are we going to deliver on time?" And it was the tap dance, yes, no, maybe. I come from a world when I was running data sets for Vista, it wasn't a yes or maybe, it was every single time, and it would just forget that pit in your stomach at a project where everything looks right, but I know there's something just not right underneath. And the permitting example for us was that we had a date on a schedule that was supposed to deliver, and there was we had that 95% chance, and we actually delivered this on time, which is why I'm sharing this example. But it didn't. I'm still new. I want to make it my year, right? But anyways, but anyways, I was talking to my engineering partner, and it was a certificate of occupancy. And for those of you in this space, certificate of occupancy is basically, hey, you have the right to run the thing that you just built. Lots of capital laying on that. There can be no uncertainty in that because revenues in your investment are tied to hitting that date. Agreements with customers, SLA penalties. But anyways, I asked a very simple question: are we going to hit this on time? And the answer was definitely maybe. Definitely maybe does not keep you in business. But essentially what happened, there were two paths to success on that. It was coming down to one, a sanitation path that we're relying on our local vendor to pursue. And this is one of those things where plant was built, we were getting permission to have it come and get checked. And then the other one was the certificate of occupancy was having a water connection approved by the local jurisdiction. Yeah, which is, just a sort of reality. The challenge that we had was the third-party risk, i.e. variability of understanding how long it could take, and when it was going to be yes and when it was going to be no. And particularly what was nutty about the whole process was, we only planned for 2, which serves the promise coming back. If you hit the third, you're not going to hit the day. So we were able to manage through that because of the Herculean effort of the team afterwards. But that's not how we want the plan. We should be able to account for that variability in the system that we give them. But this is just one thing as part of I talk permitting as a third-party risks. There's all kinds of third-party risks that you have no control over in the process. Understanding and identifying that process or identifying that early as a collection of work or information around or how much work sits behind it is very, very powerful. Because you can plan and minimize that variability as much as possible because there is uncertainty in that, which are two completely different things to point it out. So let's talk about commissioning. So that's on the front end of the permitting. Let's talk about, somebody I think said a question earlier about the complexity of commissioning, the availability of partners, Schneider, Caterpillar, the names that we're all familiar with from this road. And as we look at commissioning of a product, as we dive into this, and this represents the work that's needed to do an integrated service test on the back end, the various aspects. Let's say this is the electrical plant that we have up here. I think you're sending the mic, but I'm pretty sure that's the one we talk about here. Commissioning in the system actually starts a lot earlier in digital infrastructure. It actually starts at the point of procurement. I.e., as you have your designs and you start pulling in the equipment and designing, you need to, and as you have more and more complexities, the timing of the stuff, you need to have everything associated with that piece of equipment. What batch it was in, what's the shipping coming in, and having those as discrete steps, because you need that in the construction phase. The construction phase is showing up, but there's also the connection, and there's the thing that we're seeing now. The construction part of doing it, and once you get ready for commission to hand over to customers, two completely different systems that are very much integrated. And one of the things we're looking at is, as we look at people and accountability, sort of splitting that up so that the program management team is, they get the handoff from engineering, they're working through the process, and they start interfacing with the handover teams at the point of acquisition and documentation, so you can trace that all the way through. Because if you get to the end of an IST cycle, you get there, you're all set, and all of a sudden, one of the boards fail in your switch breaker, and that piece of equipment comes from China, in Indonesia. You're looking at 6 to 7 weeks of penalties, and that did happen. But I'm not going to say which customer because anyways, I could talk about the variability to get your ass chewed. But so that's what's causing us to look at that end as well and pulling that earlier in the cycle. So this is, and the interesting thing about this is that this is not the same project. We're looking at two completely different projects of execution. And one of the difficulties we've had is that because we have so much coming through, where do you say stop and jump in? So the projects that we're looking at as we roll out our configuration system, one is in Europe, and the reason we chose this project is a more complicated deployment where there's data centers we're building at the same time that we're building a gas power station, and we're also building a substation that all have to integrate together. And one of the benefits we've already been getting out of this is understanding as you hit your RFS date or your IST or your IST moving through it, there's key dependencies and other related projects we're managing separately that we're integrating to that's definitely going to provide successive input through it. And these are some of this is the example I was using for mapping our site commissioning process, control site commissioning, and mapping our level 1, like I talked about. Level 1 really starts with procurement as you trace through. That's it's very complicated for us that or the things we're working on. So, is it complex? Yes. What we're really looking forward to, I talked about the commissioning, and you can see the various technical aspects. You can see like a crack, transformers, RPD, remote power panels, UPSs. There's a lot of steps that have to happen perfectly to deliver on time. And the best way to be successful is to reach your problems a year in advance, because there's time to recover. Going back to what I talked earlier about controlling time, which is the one resource as project managers it's not unlimited resources, very specific, very discrete, that allows us to predict where we want to be. So, like I said, early in this journey, hopefully, as we drive our process control from schedule management, a year from now, we can talk about our successes, more discrete examples of how we eliminated the variability of Brian and his ash tube on projects and start. Way forward, 2 big steps, front end and back end to reduce our cycle time, because that's really what we're looking at. And then finally, model our project production system, how we can effectively run demand, where to invest, and how to be honest about what we can actually do. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
All right, that was good.